we started the show, developing it maybe 5 years ago, people were talking about surveillance, but they really weren't talking about AI. And
good morning. Hi, Frank. So how are you doing?
very well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing great. As I said, especially now when I get to speak with you. So it's the top of my day. So I've actually I've not seen the entire season. I was able to get screeners for the first 3 episodes, so I've seen all of those. And this is the show that actually kind of takes place in Sweden, and I write for movies in Sweden. So I obviously recognize Nana Blondell from many other things that I've seen her in. So I wanted to start out there. Why set the story in Sweden? What was the decision that made that happen?
So the genesis of the show was the idea of, if one was going to create a utopian community in the 21st century, to pick up on a tradition that was started, actually, it's been with us for centuries, but in the late 19th, early 20th century, as you probably know, companies such as Siemens, Michelin, Hershey's, Bournville, they all wanted to create these new communities for their companies to provide a safer, healthier, more egalitarian working environment. And this is for everybody from the presidents of the company down to the people who clean the factories. And it occurred to us that the 21st century version of this, if you want to keep people healthy, safer, a little bit more of a equal playing field, you would probably have to use some sort of surveillance, some sort of AI. And we realized it'd be very difficult to convince countries at large to agree to a pilot project like this. And we were trying to figure out where is a country which is contained, which has got a liberal tradition, which is quite forward-thinking, where there's obviously a concern about increasing violence, but again, an incident about such as the school shooting that was the genesis for this community would be so shocking that it might get the authorities and the governments around to approve this. We also wanted to find some place where whole parts of countries had been depopulated, as industries closed, as people were leaving the countryside, the whole areas of certain parts of European countries, which are almost become completely depopulated. Because we thought it was important that instead of building a big futuristic city, part of a sustainable utopian model would be go to existing communities and renovate them. So all of those things seem to recommend Scandinavia, and then particularly Sweden was an area that just struck us as the right. Right, and also we wanted some interesting topography. We wanted it to be quite visually beautiful because we wanted to get away from the idea this is a dystopian world. So someplace with a great deal of natural variety and beauty seemed to be the way to go. So that was how we ended up in Sweden.
Yeah, well, we're happy that you thought of us for sure. And my father-in-law actually worked for Siemens for many years, so that kind of rings true to me as well. And I was also thinking, you mentioned that you didn't want it to look like a dystopia, and this is actually set in present day and using kind of technology that we have available sort of right now. Maybe not as advanced on the AI parts, but at least not what's available for normal people at this stage. But I think that kind of sets this show apart a bit, since a lot of these kind of shows that we've seen, or movies that we've seen, tackle these kind of bigger ideas of building utopias usually happen when the rest of the world has gone further down the drain than we get to see here. So I was wondering what kind of made you want to go that way, and if that was kind of one of the things that you liked most about the pitch, or
I think for us the idea was, could you create a community that was a little bit of a pilot program? Could you create a community like Concordia with technology and an approach to everything about urban planning that countries throughout the world could incorporate. Instead of saying you'd have to go off and build a new version of Brasilia or what they're building in Dubai, could you go into all of these areas, find these communities, attract new businesses to them, attract people to come back, and repopulate it, and also make it affordable. I mean, the technology, we wanted to make sure that it was happening today, so it wasn't futuristic. The technology is there. One could install a system like this. One could also try to come up with the plan that's in Concordia. I mean, it's very important. And the fact that you're on camera 24 hours a day, but no one's watching. No one can ever see that footage without a court order to get permission, because there has to be a reason to be watched. So in some ways, it's dealing with how do you find a way to give us more protection in a world where you can always be on camera, everybody can hack into things. So that was the idea, was to make it something that people could imagine living in today. And would they, I mean, everybody who sees the show, I think there's conversations, would you agree to move to a world like this? So we wanted to make it as friendly and possible, as friendly and realistic as possible. But at the same time, there's some things that would make you very nervous about it, because again, when the technology falls into the wrong hands, we're all at risk.
Exactly. And I was kind of thinking of that, just signing into this meeting that we're having right now, how many times I had to, since I live in Sweden and Europe, and GDPR, like all the rules that we need to sign off on every web page, that we approve all the cookies and stuff that will track our data. So
Yes.
this is basically already happening,
Yeah.
except it's not video, it's everything else. And sometimes you feel like you talk about something with a loved one, and then you see some ads about that same thing the next day, and you kind of feel like, well, how did that happen?
Yes.
And I guess this, imagine us taking this just one step further, isn't that much of a stretch, maybe?
It's not much of a stretch, but also what's interesting, in Concordia, there's a firewall. Inside Concordia, no one can hack into your what's going on your internet. No one can go into your phone. You can install systems as a community to protect that. So that's part of Concordia as well. So I think all the technology that we have, which we feel makes us more vulnerable, can be used to make us safer. And that's part of what the challenge is. If you wanted to sit down and create a world like that, how would you do it? So that's what we were trying to address also, is take a force that could be misused, but turn it to good.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's a really interesting subject for sure. And in this particular show, stuff happens. There is a hack, and there is, or at least something is happening to this community that might put all this into question, if it
Yes.
is actually safe or not. So that's kind of the mystery that we get to go on, but we also get to ask these questions to ourselves, as you said. And I'm kind of wondering, playing around with that mystery, that goes more to the kind of noir kind of things that we are used to seeing from maybe the Scandinavian shows. So was that also maybe a part of putting the story here in Scandinavia?
No, it was, I think we wanted to, I mean, yes, there's a murder, I mean, I think that every,
Yeah.
but what we wanted to do was to make sure that actually we were in different territory. I mean, as you probably have noticed, we took a lot of effort to make sure all the interiors are very transparent. There are windows everywhere. We tried to shoot as much in the sunlight as we could. We tried to give it an openness. So we basically were trying to make it as welcoming and as pleasant a world in which people lived. in which also the technology was invisible and didn't interfere with their lives. They just got on with their lives. So we were actually trying to go a little bit against that tradition. Of course, when you tell people, when we went out to people saying this is a story about AI, takes place in Sweden, everybody came back thinking it was going to be a very dystopian, very dark world. And it took a lot of time to get people to embrace the idea that no, that wasn't it. You know, so, but yeah, it's hopefully that the things that really are attractive in storytelling about some of the noir shows, we've got a little bit of that running through as well, but it takes a while to sort of to dig out.
Yeah. And I'm guessing this is a show that has been in the making for quite some time. We are at the place now where the discussions about AI has reached another level, maybe from when the idea of this show was founded. And we had last year the strikes about how AI could
Yes.
interfere with both acting and writing on shows. But this is something completely different.
Yes.
Just to, but has that affected anything in how you want to kind of frame the story of the show now afterwards?
No, I mean, it's interesting because when we started the show, developing it maybe 5 years ago, people were talking about surveillance, but they really weren't talking about AI. And it was really interesting that just as we were finishing the show, you know, this whole conversation came out. And I was very glad that we had decided to place it in the present rather than the future, because you sort of felt like if you were doing this show now, the system, if we were doing a show that was going to take place 2 or 3 years in the future, the world would have to be so different because of the way AI was going to be used. So, but we were advised really by all of our consultants as us try to make it contemporary.
Yeah, I see.
Yes.
Uh, and I also know that yeah, I've obviously seen Game of Thrones. It's one of the biggest shows ever made for television, and you were on that show for many years as the executive producer. On this show, you acted as a showrunner as well, if I've understood my notes correctly. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, it's a little bit, I mean, showrunners traditionally describe an executive producer who's also a writer. It's changed a little bit now because I'm still an executive producer, but I'm called a little bit of a showrunner. I'm a non-writing. I mean, I don't write on my shows. I never wrote on Game of Thrones or anything else. But I think when you have various writers and sometimes when you have a variety of directors, you get the title of showrunner because you're the one voice through the development all the way through the production. So but it's very much the same function I've always had. It's just it's a
I see.
showrunner is also a title which when I think even when we started with Game of Thrones, I don't remember ever hearing the title showrunner. It sort of came in sort of, I think, somewhere mid-season, mid-run of that.
Yeah. So just thinking about kind of when you made the like episode, the Red Wedding episode and stuff like that, knowing how people would react to something like that and many other episodes on that show, I'm thinking that must have helped and shaped the way you work and watch like creations of. You also made The Swarm and uh, knowing how people might react to different things. Is that something you ever take into consideration, how you want to frame things, because you know people will actually react in different ways?
Um, I can't say that consciously I've made decisions based on any of those experiences, but I think as we all do, we learn from our experiences. So I think probably some of the lessons of all the shows I've done, the idea of how to reveal information, where you can make things mysterious, how do you avoid making them confusing, how do you intrigue people without irritating them because sometimes I think people are trying too hard to make things opaque or obscure, and I think sometimes things don't pay off. So I think probably it's just been a gradual accumulation of experiences, and also I think a lot of storytelling has changed for television in the last probably 10 years. I think a lot of writers and directors are also more attuned to, you know, how to dole out the surprises and keep people guessing. So yeah, I think I'm just part of that this generation that had a lot to learn over where television started when I first started and where we are now.
Well, thanks a lot for taking time to speak with me today, and best of luck with the premiere of Concordia now.
Thank you very much. Great questions. All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.